Spatter matters. Never forget that. Dexter certainly won't. Hi everyone, you're listening to Dissecting Dexter. Welcome back. I'm Gareth and it's very nearly Christmas. It is the 23rd of December as I record and I'm done with work for a few days and looking forward to just being with my family and enjoying the break. I hope you're all enjoying the Christmas build-up. Honestly, I spent a lot of toing and froing about what to do this week. When they broadcast one Dexter a week, it's easy. One podcast a week, right? But after I uploaded last week's episode, they announced a double drop for episodes 2 and 3. So to cut the story short, I ended up deciding to split it. This episode, I'm just talking about episode 2, and next week we'll look at episode 3 and go through your feedback about both, so this one won't be so long. I have to say, we're really enjoying the series so far in my house. I watch it with my wife, and I wasn't sure how she'd take to the new actors playing familiar characters. I was concerned how I'd take to it, but she said to me that although she was a little worried, she's liking these new actors and having Michael's voiceover, of course, and she says it grounds it and makes a solid connection with the Dexter we know and love. So we're all aboard, and I hope you guys are all feeling the same. We had a couple of folk last week not too happy, but I wonder how you're feeling now. Well, we've all got stuff to do, haven't we? So let's dive right in with Dexter Original Sin, Episode 2, Kid in a Candy Store. Original air date the 20th of December 2024, written by Katrina Mathewson and Tanner Bean, and directed by Michael Lehman. Here we go. So episode 1 was about reintroducing us to our familiar characters, welcoming new ones, and dropping us back into a world that we know so well, yet being set in 1991, it's fun to enjoy the differences. It was a packed episode with lots to talk about. Episode 2 now can get on with the job of pushing on into this new story, establishing the plot lines and the themes for the season. Again, they've gone with a cold open, putting us straight into a scene with the opening credits coming later. No problem with that at all, but obviously different to the original series. We rejoin Dexter where we left him last week, still swinging round in his swivel chair, savouring the high of killing Nurse Mary, enjoying the elation now his urges have finally been fulfilled. I could maybe draw a parallel with a teenager getting laid for the first time. It's like a transition into adulthood in a way, and maybe this is what we can say about Dexter here. He's transitioned into an actual killer. It's his first day in Miami Metro. Tanya gives him the 2-cent tour, and what's obvious is the lack of resources in forensics. They've got some stuff, but Dexter notices how his lab at the university was better equipped. I think forensic science was still very much in its development in 1991. DNA analysis was around, but I think was still in its infancy and not accepted in courts as evidence like it is now. This makes the police's job harder compared to what we saw in the original series, but this could also be a bonus for a fledgling serial killer finding his feet. Mistakes will surely be made, and if evidence is found, the less developed forensic techniques could be a benefit for Dexter. There's a nice moment when Dexter picks up a microscope slide, and of course we all thought the same thing. He's so eager to get stuck into some forensic work and see some dead bodies. Whoa! And this eagerness is prevalent all episode, much to the amusement of his new colleagues who pull his leg and tease him. There's a cat walks onto my lap. Hello, Cherry. It's all good-natured, this teasing. They seem like a close team who'd always have each other's backs. I mean, we know most of these people well, but in 1991 it's good to see the bond still there. Back then, and we see some gentle banter between Harry, Spencer, Batista and Bobby. It's nice and chill and good-natured. It's a nice way to show the relationship between them. It's also good to see the more chill side of Captain Spencer after he was pretty much constantly uptight and bullish last week.
Dissecting Dexter.
Spatter matters.
The kidnapping case is pretty grim. The judge's son being held captive. Not something that this show has done much with over the years, stuff with kids, so this was quite shocking. Although we'd seen glimpses of it in the pre-season trailers, so we had an inkling as to what was in store. We have no idea what this guy's motive or intention is yet. I mean, we're assuming it's a he. The police think it's cartel related, but I have a feeling they're wrong. What I do pick up on is that the person keeps their face hidden, which makes me think they're not going to kill the kid. If murder was their intention, why hide their face if he won't live to tell the tale? Although, now I've said that, they would hide their face if the show didn't want us to see them. I'm an idiot. How obvious was that? I guess killing the kid could still be possible. Actually, the child actor, I think, does a good job through the episode of looking upset and scared. It looks like he's being kept on an old boat, judging by what look like portholes in the kid's cell. Later on, when he gets his finger cut off, oh, bloody hell, that was excruciating. You really felt his pain. Nice job by the young actor, and kudos to the sound effects department. But getting back to Harry, the mention of the cartel puts us in another flashback to Harry's early career, and it's a significant part of Dexter's own history. We see how Harry meets Laura Moser, how she becomes his CI, and as we go along, I guess we'll eventually see her demise at the hands of the cartel. The meeting is interesting. She's with a guy called Joe. We don't get a surname, but I'm assuming it's Joe Driscoll, Dexter's biological father. In this episode, we see young Dexter and young Brian. Based on what we see, it looks like Dexter might be the favourite. She calls him her little angel, or is my angel, something like that. Dexter, in the present, doesn't have to wait long for his first murder scene. Spencer says it sounds like an NHI. I have a sneaky feeling I've heard that term before, maybe in a Michael Connolly book, one of the Bosch books, or certainly somewhere before. It stands for no humans involved, and the casual way Spencer says it just shows how commonly the term was used back then. It was part of their normal vernacular. By no human involved, they mean the victim was someone considered back then as socially inferior. Sex workers, gang members, drug addicts, the homeless, immigrants, and especially, unfortunately, if it involved people of colour. It's shameful, but not surprising that this was ever a thing, but it's in the show and in other aspects of law enforcement in those days. This isn't about being PC. This is just human degradation at a very low level, how some lives are worth more than others, and the implication here is that the police wouldn't spend as much resource on crimes that involved NHIs. Awful, but it was a thing. Even Batista uses the term as a character we know and love. But I did like how he recognised how bad it sounds. He says, I realise that sounds awful when I say it out loud. He says something like that when he explains it to Dexter. Officers like him, of course, are the future of the department, so we know there's hope. Obviously, we're not here to discuss politics or sociology, but when this is presented to us in the show, it would be remiss of us not to talk about it, however uncomfortable it makes us. We like these characters, but it puts us in a more morally tricky position as we watch them. And maybe that's a good thing. Makes us feel uncomfortable and maybe self-reflect a little bit. I do think good drama should be challenging, however it does it. I realise that among viewers of the show and listeners of this podcast, strength of opinions will vary on this, but I hope you understand that I couldn't let this pass without acknowledging it. If anyone is inclined to comment about this or send in feedback, please let's just keep it kind and we'll try to be non-political. But it's a controversial subject, isn't it? Back to the show, Harry, we see, is still clinging on to a hope that Dexter won't need to kill again. He makes a comment about how maybe dealing with dead bodies on the job will be enough. I liked Dexter's response, where he says, like methadone for a heroin addict. He does seem sceptical though, doesn't he? I wonder how that'll work out. Dexter really is the kid in the candy store. He's all giddy and excited at the crime scene, and he has a good theory about where the shooter was standing, showing again how he's got some natural ability at reading blood spatter. However, it amused me when the others at first seemed to indulge him before obviously having some fun at his expense. It's hilarious. His audience grows ever bigger, and he's giving them this amazing revelation, but these experienced professionals had obviously read the scene too. God knows how many other similar scenes they'd attended in the past. But I love that Dexter is all excited, and even though they poke some gentle fun at him, they must be impressed at his enthusiasm and ability to read a scene so well and so quickly. It requires Harry to point out the gallows humour to him before Dexter realises, and Harry encourages him to give a bit back, blend in. Something Dexter talked to us about often back in the early days of season 1. Later in the episode, we see him bringing a plate of vegetables to work. We soon see this switch to donuts, which were far more welcome, but I thought it was really funny trying to hand raw chunks of broccoli and carrots. He's obviously picked up on cops often having an unhealthy diet, not least Harry, and that this might be a good way of ingratiating himself while helping them to be healthier. Bless him. It's the thought that counts, isn't it? The sequence at the bar when they go for lunch. Quite a bit to talk about here. On the surface, it's a scene with Dexter making attempts to blend in, be one of the guys, try and join in the banter, and he's smiling to himself, and I think he's right to be quite pleased at this situation he finds himself in, how he's never been with friends like this before. Obviously, we use the word friends in inverted commas. They're still colleagues at this point, although obviously he knows Bobby Watt as a family friend. The guys pull a joke on him with an empty sandwich, and Dexter gets presented with his laminate ID badge, and it's really nice. They applaud for him, and they're really warm and friendly. Dexter must be getting that warm fuzzy glow of acceptance, which is important for anyone to feel, any one of us. However, socially clumsy Dexter is never far away, and he makes a very misjudged joke about Bobby being a bite away from a heart attack. Ooh, too soon, Harry. Batista says something like, "Oh, that's morbid, bro." It's a thing that some people have social communication difficulties and find banter and small talk challenging, if not completely baffling, and this can lead to making inappropriate jokes or comments, well intended but misjudged, like here. So that's all on the surface, but what might not be so obvious in this scene is something very, very different. It's a theory, and I have no claim to it. This was out there on the internet before I started prepping for this. Let's hear this bit again.
Anyone sitting here?
Yeah, I'm saving these seats for my friends. Sorry.
No problem.
Just a guy looking for somewhere to sit? Have another look at that scene if you've got a chance. Now, when I saw this bit, I didn't jump to any crazy theories, but I did find it a little odd that a random guy would ask a complete stranger if he could sit at his table. I don't know how widespread this is as a thing, but it's not something I'd do. I wouldn't feel comfortable. But at the time, I thought maybe he was just there as a plot device, so Dexter could make that remark about the table being for his friends and then have that little internal dialogue. The theory about this guy is that he's Brian. Yes, that Brian. He's dressed similarly to how we often saw him dress in season 1. Open shirt over a t-shirt, similar hairstyle, same physical build and about the right age. Was this Brian about to sit down and introduce himself to his little brother? He certainly knew a lot about Dexter in season 1, so it makes sense he'd been following him for a while, and maybe he was playing the long game, following him from his early 20s. Research by other people on the internet has identified the actor Robbie et al., and on his IMDb page, his role in this episode is left blank, which could mean he's just random nameless guy in restaurant, or it could mean they want to keep his identity secret. Robbie has an Instagram account, and among his followers, apparently, I've not looked, are Patrick Gibson, Molly Brown, Reno Wilson, and Alex Shimizu. Would these people follow the account of an extra? Well, I say extra, he had lines, but you know what I'm saying. It's a fascinating theory, and I love it. It makes total sense that Brian had been watching his little brother for a long time. I'd love to see a conversation happen, some kind of cryptic conversation. Maybe they'll meet again later, or we'll just get further teases. Maybe we'll have to watch for him in the background, just to let us know that he was watching Dexter for a long time before the events of season 1. Maybe they'll visit a crime scene later in the season with features that don't resonate to Dexter, but do to us as being hallmarks of the ice truck killer. I love this. And I'm sure we'll all be keeping an eye out moving forward.
I went to the church that night that you killed Travis Marshall to tell you that.
She's still making lots of comments about feeling left out with her dad, jealous of the amount of time he spends with Dexter, and you can understand it completely. She needs her dad as much as Dexter does. Obviously for different reasons. There's a funny line when she comments on how cheerful Dexter's been and asks him if he got laid. She makes them dinner and Harry's dismayed to find it's tofu kebabs. Now, I found that really funny. I don't eat meat myself, and I know how bland tofu can be if you don't add something to it, and she makes an effort with the hot sauce. But obviously Deb's trying to encourage Harry to eat healthy, and tofu is certainly low in fat. In this scene, Harry and Dexter talk about his first day at work, and Dexter saying how exciting it was.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not the same as Nurse Mary. That was euphoric and almost indescribable. But today was good. Really good. Plus, Miami Metro gives me way more of a rush than med school.
I guess you were right about the whole methadone thing, huh? Sounds like you're putting all this behind you.
Harry's face is interesting here, listening to Dexter. Reacting to the way he talks so matter-of-fact about all this. It's good they have such an open relationship that Dexter can talk about this, but again, we see how Harry is almost in denial, still maintaining some optimism that this job will do the trick. Dexter gives some thought to what Harry says, though. Is this job enough? He caresses his trophy from Nurse Mary, those earrings, hidden in a video box. I paused it, actually, to see what titles he had on his shelf. I couldn't read all of them, but I could see It, Evil Dead, Halloween, The Haunting, Darkman, Manhunter, Psycho, The Twilight Zone. Some classic horror in there, and certainly some serial killer movies. And not surprising he likes them. Dexter wonders if looking at the earrings will help keep his urges quiet, but I think it only reminds him of the euphoria he felt, and he ends up wanting it again. Back to Deb, though. Harry apologises about dinner, but Deb's upset about so much more than that. She's long had to play second fiddle to Dexter, and now, as she puts it, every day is bring your son to work day, so he and Dex get even more time together. Deb misses her mum, basically. At least with her mum, she had someone. Harry's so clumsy in his response, and you really feel sorry for her. She's right. Who does she have now? Her only remaining parent is completely embroiled in her brother.
This is the Dissecting Dexter podcast.
It helps me control the chaos.
Back at work, Dexter's sent down to Records to get some files on recent drug-related homicides, and he meets our old friend Camilla, chowing down on some key lime pie. Remember that Camilla was good friends with Doris. Smoking like a chimney, though, and we know how that turns out for her. Among the police records, Dexter's excited by all this information about cases, and he describes himself as a kid in a candy store. We meet back up with Levi Reed, that big guy they busted last week. We had a feeling that he might get off on a technicality. Harry's dismissive of a potential alibi for Reed because it's coming from a drug addict. He's quite rude to her, actually. Yes, she's a user. Doesn't mean she's lying necessarily. Plus, they think Reed's committed multiple crimes. I do think this could come back to bite them. Reed gives Harry a very dark look at the courtroom. Have these two got history? Or is it just because he was one of the arresting officers? A conversation with the judge and reference to losing a son prompts another flashback. This time we see Doris, looking incredibly sad, nursing a bottle of wine as Harry comes home excited at the progress in his case against the cartel with his new informant. Looks like they're trying for another baby, and Doris is sad because the latest test has come back negative. We learn they've been trying for 2 years, which can be quite normal for some couples. But for them, having lost a child, this is going to be really tough, and judging by the alcohol, she's not coping well. To be fair, the wine won't be helping their chances of conceiving, but then we know more about that kind of thing these days. Harry's drinking and smoking, that won't help either. Back to Deb. While she doesn't have her mum, she's very close to her best friend Sophia, who's got the hots for Dexter since he beat up that guy at the party, which is pretty funny, like she'd never noticed him before. They'd been looking at some expensive sunglasses that Deb can't afford, but she's looking around the home for something to sell, something no one would miss. She looks at her mum's jewellery, but she just can't bring herself to take it. She ends up finding the earrings hidden in Dexter's room and unsuccessfully tries to pawn them and ends up pawning her mum's pearls, and Sophia gets the earrings. Wait till Dexter spots those. Batista takes Dexter for a night out. Dexter once again stuffing his face. He seems to be eating more often than he's not. Where is he putting it? The guy's so slim, he must have hollow legs. Batista tries to show him a few dance moves. Of course, we know how Dexter feels about dancing. Although Harry put him up to it, we know that in the future, Batista and Dexter will become much better friends. Certainly from Batista's perspective. Dexter perhaps doesn't realise this so well. For this season, though, the scene brings Renee to our attention. The club salutes the memory of Renee, a kid who used to work there. Renee's tragic story sets up Dexter's next target, a loan shark called Tony Ferrer. I remember seeing him in the season trailer. We know he fits the code. A killer who keeps eluding justice, will kill again, preying on the vulnerable. He sounds perfect, doesn't he? Dexter's mind is racing, and we know he's getting that urge again. Those earrings that he was fondling, they were like catnip. Yes, the cat's still here. Hello, Cherry. We close out the episode with Dexter's mind made up. He seemed to be quite affected when the judge's kid's finger turned up. The close-up on his face. Was it just me, or did it look like he was almost shaking with anger? Maybe it took him by surprise how bothered he was. However, he can't, of course, go after the person responsible because all of Miami PD is doing that, and Dexter recognises that fact. However, he can take it out on someone else, and we leave him in the records room doing his homework on handsome Tony Ferrer.
You're listening to Dissecting Dexter.
I really enjoyed this episode. Honestly, though, not as much as last week. I think I was caught up in my own silly emotions last episode, thinking about these characters, thinking about where Deb ends up, the revelation about the Morgans' first child. And I love to feel something when I watch a film or TV show. When I do, it sticks with me more. So, with last week setting the scene, this week was very much making a start on our storylines, plus that delicious theory about Brian. I really love that. No feedback section this week. With it being Christmas week, I'm trying to minimise the podcast workload. I hope you understand. But it does mean there's plenty of time left to get in your thoughts on episodes 2 and or 3. And I'll have a look at them next time. dissectingdexter@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @DissectDexter, and on Blue Sky, search for Dissecting Dexter. There's also facebook.com/DissectingDexter. As always, if you like what you hear, you can support me and the podcast by leaving a nice review on iTunes or whichever podcast app you use. And if you want to go a step further, you can help cover the podcast hosting costs by joining Patreon, patreon.com/dissectingdexter. That's the place to go if you want to support from as little as £1 a month. And of course, I'm so grateful to those who already support me there. It really does help, and my thanks go to each of you. And particularly to my newest Patreon supporters. Thank you to Nick, Inga, Nikki, Carrie and Mike. You're all so kind with your support, and I very, very much appreciate it. Okay, I'll leave it there. But last thing before I do, I'd like to sincerely wish each and every one of you a very happy and peaceful Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, then I wish you a wonderful holiday season. All the best to you and your families. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back after Christmas dissecting more new Dexter. Until then, take care. Bye for now.